Welcome back everyone to a fully loaded Cobra Kai Season 3 watch party. Obviously, since the release of Season 2, the Season 3 theories have been running non-stop. I first thought about Season 3 in broad strokes back at the beginning of May and made some predictions on how I thought it was going to be. Now, I never made any videos on those predictions, but I did hint at what I was thinking in the episode titles of the Okinawa video. Now that I've finished analyzing Season 2, it is time for me to share my thoughts on Season 3. If you watch Season 3 prediction and theory videos, you'll find that they usually revolve around one specific plot point or detail. Normally the plot point connects in your head or seems to make sense somehow, and that's how at least some become popular. Tori begs her mom Allie to come save Miguel, or Johnny and Daniel team up to take down Kreese, are two of the more popular examples. That's not what I'm going to be doing here, because before we get into specific plot predictions, it's better to get a grasp on the season as a whole. The theme of Season 2 was dojos at war. The tension between the two dojos was simmering and building all through one cruel summer until it exploded in a massive fight. So if you want to think about Season 3, you should start by asking, what comes after a war? Well, after a war, you have to pick yourself up and rebuild. You have to somehow find a way to put your life back together. Now look at most of the main characters in the show. The events or war at the end of Season 2 has changed their life in a significant yet different way. The most obvious is Miguel with his injury, but start looking at each character individually and you can see it across the board. They're all going to have to find a way to put their life back together. I think that is the theme of Season 3, rebuilding your life after it has been ripped apart by war. But if we take a step further back, we'll realize that in the Karate Kid saga, these aren't the only people who've had their life forever changed by war. The two senseis, perhaps the most influential characters, were both shaped by their respective wars. Now I want to talk about basic story structure really quick. In structured storytelling, you have your opening act. You introduce your characters, your heroes, the conflict and themes. Then the characters make a decision that moves you into Act 2. You have subplots and a lot of fun and games. You're showing off everything that the story promises to be. Then there's a section before the midpoint where you take a breather and explore some of the backstory. Why are the characters the way they are? It's an opportunity to really flesh out the people in the story. Now consider something else. Imagine you are a huge Karate Kid fan. The Karate Kid movies were one of the biggest passions of your whole life. Then, one day as an adult, you get an opportunity to make a new TV series that's a continuation of the story. It's the opportunity of a lifetime. Now, would a lifelong Karate Kid fan be interested in questions like, where did Kreese and Miyagi diverge in their life paths? Why did Kreese think the way he does, and why does Miyagi think the way he does? How did Kreese save Terry Silver so many times in Vietnam? And maybe how did Miyagi win that Medal of Honor? Are those questions super huge Karate Kid fans would want to look into, or would they just brush it off? Not interesting, it's in the past. I happen to think those are all questions 3 super fans would want to look into. And if we think Cobra Kai is a show that'll run maybe 6 or 7 seasons, then following basic story structure, Season 3 is precisely where that would go. And as I said, if we think Season 3 has a theme of putting your life back together after a war, it all fits perfectly together. Now the question is, how do they do this? The show has had numerous flashbacks already. Is that what we're getting? Just more of it? As it is, I don't think so. At least not in the way you're thinking. Jon Hurwitz does a lot of Q&As on Twitter, and a while back there was a question he answered or didn't answer, and it stuck out to me. The question was simple, and it's something you've wondered yourself. What will Season 3's time frame be? Since Season 1 covered the whole school year, then Season 2 covered the summer and ended at the very beginning of the school year, there's a tendency to assume Season 3 will mirror Season 1 and cover the school year again. It was my general thinking, and it certainly seemed to be what Shadowlace was thinking too. However, look at Hurwitz's reply. He declines to answer because, note, it could give away too much. Maybe I'm the only one in this whole fandom, but that answer caused me to stop in my tracks. Consider this for a moment. Will it cover the whole school year? If the answer to that were just yes, would that really be giving away too much? It's what most people were thinking already. I don't think so, and I really don't think he would have replied the way he did if the answer were yes. So then let's work backwards. What is an answer to this question that would make sense for the show and also give away too much? Well, what if the timeline were really condensed? The whole season took the span of a couple of weeks, maybe a month. The problem is, considering what is likely to happen in the show, especially with Miguel's recovery and fallout from the fight, I think a condensed timeline is very unlikely. So let's rule that out. On the other end is perhaps a much more drawn out timeline. What if season 3 spanned maybe 2 whole years? First off, it would easily handle all those issues about recovery, any jail time or whatever legal consequences, and have one other unique function. In that case, by the end of the season, the main kid characters would all be out of high school. That could be interesting, as it would set up the second half of the series to go in a different direction than the first. It's a way for the show to continue and evolve. I like the idea and it would make some sense, but I don't think that's going to be the case here. Knowing backstory was going to be crucial to season 3, I've been thinking a lot about nonlinear storytelling. That is, we're not going to be getting so much flashbacks as we'll get multiple stories being told across different time periods in a single episode. While the present day story advances, there will also be a plot with Miyagi after and before World War II, and the same with Kreese but with Vietnam, similar to how Lost or Westworld were. Expect some parallels and echoes, but also contrast. Miyagi had lost almost everything by the end of the war. His wife and son had died. He already left his family when he came to America. Can you see a similar situation to a present-day character? On the other hand, when Kreese was in Vietnam, the government was tying their hands. They weren't allowed to fight to win. Is there a similar situation in the present day? Even more so, when the soldiers from Vietnam came home, they were met with massive protests. Liberals and progressives of the era who opposed the war even spit on the soldiers. With Daniel, there's a strong possibility the fallout from the school fight that involved his own daughter and karate students could lead to some sort of boycott against LaRusso Luxury Motors, especially if it is egged on by an unscrupulous competitor. We got confirmation of a little romance in season 3, but no, I don't think this is Daniel and Amanda, Johnny and Carmen, or any of the kids. Not directly. But did you ever stop and consider that Sam and Tori seem to most closely resemble Miyagi and Sato? Miyagi went after a girl Sato was promised to and seemingly in love with, kind of the same way Sam did to Tori's boyfriend. The reactions from Tori and Sato are pretty much the same. I think we're going to see Sato confront Miyagi, possibly during a storm, in a great parallel to Karate Kid Part 2. We know Miyagi runs, and that is one difference. Sam couldn't. Get back in there! Also, do you think maybe Yuki reacted the way Miguel did after the kiss? Is it possible that is partly why Miyagi ran? By the way, if you follow me on Twitter, you would have seen what I think that romance scene was. So as we look at our theme of how do you rebuild your life after a war and you've lost everything you care about, we can see the story for Season 3 doesn't span 1 year or 1 school year. Season 3 will likely cover, in broad strokes, about 70 years. I think that is a good reason why Hurwitz couldn't answer the question without giving too much away. Now, an important question to ask is, how are they going to do this? How do they show Mr. Miyagi as a young man? Would they really dare to recast the character and ask an actor to step into the iconic role created by Pat Morita? My instincts initially were no, they wouldn't. They would leave Mr. Miyagi as he is. But upon reflection, I realized they already did. Well, no, not him, but here. This shows us at the very least they are willing to use a new actor to portray a younger Mr. Miyagi. Speaking of which, does anyone know who this actor is? The role is uncredited and I'm curious. But what we see here is a willingness to bring back Mr. Miyagi, and I think if it's done right, it can really serve the story. And I want to talk about that story a little bit and how it relates to the main characters. There's two basic ways you can take a character's story. You can go big or you can go small. Now that has nothing to do with whether it's good or bad. I'm referring to scale and scope. So far, most of the kids' stories have been big, while Johnny and Daniel were small. If you look at Miguel in Season 1, a lot of what he did was big, culminating at the All Valley. In contrast, Johnny and Daniel had small stories. They were personal, their internal struggles. Season 2 continued this even more so. Johnny struggled with Kreese, his friends, and his son, small stories. Daniel was trying to keep his focus while teaching his students and fix the problems he created with his wife. A long scene in the backseat of a car is a pretty good example of what I mean when I say small. In contrast, look at the kids in Season 2. The stories were big and kept getting bigger and bigger until we had this huge fight that wrapped them all up in a brawl. I bring this up because I think Season 3 is going to reverse that. In Season 3, the kids' stories will be small, while Johnny and Daniel are going big. So as you look forward to Season 3, think about it like that. The easiest is Miguel and his injury. His story will be one of recovery and family issues that are coming. Robbie will have to deal with the consequences, probably legal trouble with what he did, and that he ran off. It's a similar situation with Tori and Sam, while she'll be doing whatever she can to put herself back together again. These are small stories as in personal. They're overcoming their own problems. It doesn't mean bad. It doesn't mean there won't be any badass karate. It just means these characters won't be on a huge epic story arc this season. It's personal stories. Like I said, think back to the example of the car. Robbie and Sam, Tori and Miguel. There's a lot they can still do in the backseat of a car. Okay, that didn't come across the way I intended. Let's just move on. In contrast, for Daniel and Johnny, I think things are going to ramp up, and I'm including Kreese and maybe even Miyagi in this. As you think about Season 3, expect their stories to go big and then even bigger. The question now is, how big? While nominated for an Emmy for the Season 2 stunts, the stunt coordinator, Hiro Koda, was given the green light to drop a little tease for Season 3. He said Season 3 was going to end with an epic fight that would even top the school fight. Yeah! So naturally, the theories and rumor mills have run wild. A lot of people seem to think it's Johnny and Daniel teaming up to fight Kreese for control of Cobra Kai, or some sort of rematch between Tori and Sam. Those are good theories and make sense, but I don't think it's any of that. Like I said, I think Season 3 will have a strong focus on backstory, and this show is made by 3 of the biggest Karate Kid fans there are. So let's explore. Is there anything in the backstory of the Karate Kid universe that could make for a good fight?
You told me you fought a lot.
Ah, for life, not for points.
And where was he fighting for his life?
Miyagi report to kill many Germans.
In the 442nd alongside Lieutenant Jack Pierce, where he won the Medal of Honor. Meanwhile...
What about Vietnam, huh?
How many times did you save my ass? I don't know. I lost count.
Kreese and Terry Silver were fighting a horrific guerrilla war in the jungles of Vietnam. This is where John Kreese founded Cobra Kai with his unit. Kreese created his creed, strike first, strike hard, and no mercy. So I think this is going to be the foundation of the huge fight at the end of the season. It's not one fight, but 3, and in 3 different time periods. The show will intercut between them, creating one major brawl. Miyagi and Jack Pierce fighting the Germans in World War II. Kreese and Terry Silver fighting with the inaugural Cobra Kai unit in Vietnam. And a third fight in the present day, probably Johnny and Daniel fighting together, though not against Kreese, but some other yet unknown bad guys. Now I also have a theory on the theme or ultimate meaning of this fight, but to see that we have to look back at the Cobra Kai dojo. When first building the dojo, Johnny put the creed on the wall, with a slight spacing error on the no mercy. The idea of no mercy was prominent in the final fight of the season, with Miguel and Robbie, as Miguel was willing to do whatever it took to win. That is, what was on the wall ultimately was a theme in the last fight. In the second season, the dojo expanded and Johnny put another Cobra Kai motto up. Yes, Cobra Kai never dies. Now this is all kind of played right into the final fight, didn't it? Miguel took a horrible fall and may die. Again, I see a connection between what's on the wall and the final fight. So what does this mean for Season 3? Well, Cobra Kids, a well-run fan account on Instagram, made a post about Kreese's renovations to the Cobra Kai dojo that are probably going to happen early in the season. It was based on this picture. Note, this is right at the entrance and would be the first thing students see when they walk in. You can see how this Cobra Kai model can play into what I think will be the final fight.
In this dojo, does it? Cannot, must not. It's okay, lose to opponent. Must not lose to fear.
Not giving into fear appears to be one spot where Kreese and Mr. Miyagi agreed.
You stay focused. Then you show your best karate still inside. Now time, let out.
After losing his wife and son while deployed, Miyagi had to find it in himself to fight the Germans. Kreese lost a lot of good men in his unit, but he still had to keep fighting. And these two, they lost a lot too. I suspect over much of this season they'll be afraid. By teaching karate, were they making things worse? What if they caused? They will have to conquer their fear as well. With a fight like this cutting back and forth between different time periods, you will see karate in its truest form, in self-defense, saving your life and the life of someone else. This is how Miyagi earned the Medal of Honor. You're going to see that. It's how Kreese saved Terry Silver in his unit in Vietnam. You're going to see that too. And it's how Johnny and Daniel will relearn the purpose of karate and why they need to teach it. You're going to see that. So this is what my theory on the big epic fight at the end of the season was ever since it was announced. I wanted to share it with you at the proper time. Since then, the show's creators have made tweets like this. Now, I didn't base my theory off that tweet, but I did take it as confirmation of what I was already thinking. He jokes around a lot, but I think he was throwing out something true that seemed outrageous or not possible. I happen to think this tweet was completely serious, except no one knew how. We're going to have to wait for the teaser or full trailer to see if any of this is close. I will say the fight as I see it is the coolest thing I can think of, and I think it's the sort of thing the show's creators would do too. Do you think that sounds as cool as hell? Do you think it sounds like it would top the school fight at the end of Season 2? Let me know. Also, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to keep Season 3 videos coming. Up next, we'll look at John Kreese and his possible character arc for the season. This will include what I think the bad guys are in the present day fight. I hope you have a very good day. I will see you again soon.